Hey there. So let's jump in and show you one way you can use Dumplink, a product design and development software tool for figuring out, unpacking, capturing, and communicating out the unfolding of your software projects. There's a nice, simple, and publicly available example in the book Shape Up from 37 Signals that we'll use, so you can check that out there and learn more if you like. The project example we'll walk through is about a feature to create and save drafts of messages in a new app. So let's create a dump link for the landing page. So we're on the landing page now, and we'll call it messages. All right. And then we notice we have this thing here called appetite, and this is very different than estimates as noted in the Shape Up book. This is just simply about how much time we think something is worth spending on. This probably was already determined at the point where deciding on the project we were going to work on was established. So we just fill out some personal information here and make a dump link. So let's just head quickly over to the settings. The day that you make your dump link project is the start date. If that's different, you can always change that here. So let's just assume that today is the day we're going to kick off the project. Now, one last thing here too is when you do click your appetite, you essentially wind up the appetite time piece, which produces a progress bar that teams can use to reference when the project started. And we can see that up here. So you can see your start date, end date, and how many days are left within the appetite that you've set. So for the sake of time, let's assume that there's already a deep understanding of the project outline at hand, so we can start at the point where Dumplink really shines right now. So that said, we start by listing all the implementation details we think need to happen and put them into this area here called the dump. This initial technique helps the team consider the package of shaped work as a whole by turning the whole thing into rough implementation details without concerning themselves with structure and order before starting on any one area. So I'm going to list some implementation details here, given the shaped work that was packaged into the project outline for this messages feature now. Okay, looks good. So of course, we'll discover tasks as we design and develop over the cycle, but for now, we have some initial tasks we think we can work from here. And with this list, we can drag tasks to the unnamed task groups, as we can see here on the right-hand side. We have 10 empty group buckets to naturally constrain the size and of the slices in a project. So if you need more task groups, we found that you probably will need to scope off the work into a separate modular project. So let's put like with like to cluster tasks into groups from the dump to the task group clusters. So it becomes clear where we can get one piece done at a time, that is to focus on one key interaction we can integrate. That said, we might not know how to map all the tasks at the start of a project cycle, but let's begin with one relationship we can see here. So I can see that hook up the manual draft creation and allow invalid drafts to be created. And this message for the wrapper labels all sort of fit within the same related piece of work. So we can now kind of name this something, this group, something non-arbitrary, like create a new draft. So I'll do that here at the task group name. Looks good. Great. So let's say we start working on this task group first, as it feels good to get some piece of the project done. And it seems as if, let's assume here that there's some big unknowns in this part of the work. And I can actually flag that here by showing that there's more unknowns in this task group maybe than in others. So Dumplink makes it really simple for teams to represent project movement by thinking about the task group at the task group level instead of down into the individual implementation details themselves. And we do that in two major key states, the figuring out and the figured out state. You can see that we're defaulting to figuring out, but there might be some tasks that you already have sort of a clear understanding of how to execute, and that's fine. We believe that creative problem-solving work sometimes requires more than a simple in-progress state. So we're not always sure, right, exactly how to execute and need to first unpack or play around and spike and research a bit before we can execute with certainty. So viewing the work at this altitude, always at the task group level, requires less attention from the teams so they can focus on real work. and knob dialing, since we're abstracting away multiple states and statuses into two most important phases of work, unknown and known sort of states, if you will, or unsolved and solved, figuring out or figured out. And this also gives everyone else who's not necessarily on the project, maybe reviewers or stakeholders, a sense of the current state of risk to spark constructive conversation about cutting back on scope if needed. So let's say that we're in a figured out mindset for only you can see this draft wrapper labels piece. So I simply click on the checkbox next to it, and we can see that this risk ratio bar has changed, and we have added a task into the figured out state. So as we can see, there start to be like a little bit of understanding of, how the work sort of level of uncertainty is unfolding. And as we make progress on these tasks and there are no more unknowns left, so let's say that everything is figured out, a global sort of task group checkbox option appears here at the top. We believe that should not exist so long as there's at least one task in the figuring out state, because this entire piece of work can be QA'd and figured out and considered done only when everything is figured out and essentially considered to be integratable or shippable by the team. So you can simply do that by indicating it is done by clicking the checkbox. So let's come back to the other tasks in the dump here. After about a week, let's assume we might have a better sense of the task group mapping that makes up the whole project. So let me just start clustering these to show how that could look. All right, everything looks good. This is a good start. At this point, for this project, we might now have a sense as to where to start and call out the sequence at the task group level of abstraction. Okay, so now we're going to head over to the task sequencer screen here, and let's just start wiring things up. Essentially, we're going to look at the task groups and think about where doing one of them enables us to do another, and continue that until we are done interrelating the task groups. So by doing start or create a new draft, that helps us do locate. So I just simply drag from this task group to this one. Pretty simple. And then doing locate seems to unlock doing send. And we've also sort of thought that maybe it helps us do trash and store. Or save and edit, let's say. And perhaps save and edit helps us do reply. And I added these two task groups as separate pieces. And maybe things work like this. That seems fine. So now that we have interrelated the task groups, we can head over to the task group arranger screen and see how Dumplink structured that data over layers to better visualize causal relationships so we know what to do over time. Now, looking at the positioning of, say, stores and let's say send and save and edit and trash, we might decide that even though locate helps enable us to do these three different task groups, we might not want to do them all in parallel. So it's pretty simple to make some adjustments here, and maybe we decide that we want to do trash after send. So we can kind of move things around a little bit like that. And we decide that maybe doing send and reply makes sense to do in parallel. And also note that these sort of marketing components of this project are independent. So we can also decide to say, hey, maybe we want the marketing blog post to happen at the end. We want it to sort of sit independently from the rest of the actual product development work. And so that's just sort of scoped off for separate task groups that we can work on independently from the rest of the work. And so there we have it. Adjusting the plan looks good now. Let's head back over to the dump and the task grouper screen. So let's assume we've made some design and development progress. I'll indicate that with some task status changes for now. So let's see. Yeah, okay, so that looks good. Now, back over in the task arranger screen, we can also see that the risk ratio meters between unsolved and solved states here in the standard orange and yellow line bar, respectively. We can also see that the values add up at the top here at the sort of task group level, how many task groups are actually done, how many are still being figured out, how many are still figured out. So that helps you get a macro view along with your time left in your appetite timepiece progress bar there. But we can start to see and have a conversation around, hey, look, we're a certain amount of time through and some things are still being figured out, but looks like progress is happening. Well, this helps to facilitate communication. So with our task group sequenced and arranged in the progress bar at the macro task group level, visualized by states of uncertainty and certainty around the work, we can see a natural and strong reproduction of the in-flight plan and state of movement. And this helps to facilitate, just as mentioned, all kinds of important conversations about scope hammering and delegation and ownership. So being able to reference the appetite timepiece progress bar, we have a sense of the looming deadline constraint we agreed on in our faces the whole time, so we can feel the creative back pressure of the budget for the feature in flight. Now, this helps to inform our build cycle choices, acting as a risk management technique that lets everyone know, for example, if we're at the end of our deadline and there are no unknowns left and very few figured out pieces of work to finish up, we could more intelligently decide with Dumplink if we should extend the project or cancel it and move on to something else. So if we're at the very end of our time budget and theoretically, let's say, have 3 days left and the project maybe looks like this, depending on how the team feels about the rest of the work that's still being figured out, and some of it that's still figured out, but still being worked on, we might decide that there's too many unknowns to continue and it's better to come back to it instead of dragging things out to maintain optionality and do other things that we want to do. So there we go. Powered by human intelligence, we were able to seamlessly divide up a well-shaped project idea, which we assumed we had background knowledge of for this example, which sort of empowers teams to own the creation of their tasks while maintaining the context of the whole, making it a breeze to communicate progress seamlessly and ensuring there's enough direction, but also enough room for implementation teams to plan and make trade-offs in the context of development. It's really simple to get started and experience a better way of planning in the context of construction. So we hope you give it a try, and thanks for watching.